Module 12, Persuasive Messages. Persuasive messages are quite common in the business arena. They can range anything from orders that you need to make, collection letters that are being sent to people, performance appraisals, letters of recommendation, recommendations for certain types of actions or requests for certain types of actions. So they're actually quite frequent in the business world. Not infrequently, what you're trying to do is change people's behavior with your request for action in your message. So a fair number of business communication messages are persuasive in their focus. So in terms of the primary purposes of a persuasive message, they're all about reader motivation. And so you primarily want the reader to act, and you want to provide enough information so they know exactly what to do, so the job gets done exactly as you need it to. Your secondary purpose, of course, in persuasive messages is, as always, building goodwill and maintaining strong and good professional relationships. So you want to be aware of that as you're persuading. You want to respect the other person's integrity and not look to manipulate them, but to give them honestly and objectively the information that they need. So as I mentioned, there are different types of persuasive messages: orders and requests, proposals and recommendations, sales or fundraising letters, job application or cover letters are types of persuasive messages, any report that has a recommendation attached to it, as well as any efforts to change behavior, such as collection ads or collection letters, public service ads, performance appraisals. These are all types of persuasive messages. So again, pretty prolific, pretty integrated into our daily lives in the workplace. However, we have to, again, think about that primary purpose, that we want to ask someone to do something. We want to motivate readers to act. And to motivate them in a persuasive message, you need to give them reasoning and overcome any objections or resistance they might have to the message. So I have a little cartoon down here that kind of makes light of that difficult need to explain to people information so that they can actually act and feel ownership over the decision. So one way to assist this is to organize your persuasive message effectively, and you want to depend that decision on the amount of resistance that you expect. If you're not asking anyone anything too inconvenient and you don't need a response from everyone, for instance, you're searching for volunteers for the company, picnic on Saturday, this isn't a request that's going to raise a lot of resistance. People will self-select. People who are available and can do it will, so you don't need everyone to buy in. And you can use a direct request pattern in that case, which we'll discuss. However, frequently you don't necessarily have that easy of a request to put forth, and so then you would use a problem-solving pattern, and that's actually kind of going to be related to Module 23 and the kinds of reports that you often are asked to write, and the kinds of justification report, which we'll be modeling our assignment number 4 after, is actually a modified problem-solving pattern. This is when you might expect some objections or resistance from the audience. In fact, sometimes you might have a great deal of resistance if it's particularly inconvenient or problematic request, and asks people who have a vested interest to really change their behaviors. Problem solving is appropriate when you need action from everyone. So everyone has to buy in. This would be something like a policy change that, just everyone has to be a part of. Very much like in your negative message when you were writing about, eliminating dress down Fridays, or other kinds of changes to the office workplace, and that everyone has to comply. And so in that case, you're going to expect the logic is going to be more important than the emotion. That would also be like when the problem-solving pattern would work. We're going to try to downplay, again, emotions and personal kinds of things in a lot of these messages. For the most part, we're going to try to work toward evidence and appealing to people's logic and common sense. So in a direct request, again, this is when you expect people to self-select. You don't expect any resistance. So in that case, your subject line can be pretty straightforward. You can just actually state your request or the topic of the request and the subject line, and you can even use a question. The pattern then is pretty straight up. The introduction just names the request. That's your purpose. That's what you start with. And then of course, the body, you give the details that are needed to act. So for instance, in that example of asking people to volunteer for the company picnic, when do they need to show up? What do they need to bring? How long do they have to be there? What are the details of the request? And then you close with a reminder of what exactly you want them to do. Do you want them to, RSVP with you, sign up on the sign-up sheet that's hung above the copy machine? How do they follow through? So direct request is pretty simple. Problem solving, though, tries to get the reader to understand the rationale of what you're doing before they jump to conclusions or have an emotional response. And so in this case, we're going to keep our subject line neutral or positive. If you have a subject line that's fairly specific, you want to focus on the solution and how you're solving the problem rather than on the negative problem. So again, neutral or positive. Do not put negatives in your subject line. In terms of organization, again, this goes back to this notion that you're going to address this as a shared problem. It sounds very much like the negative messages that you would address, say, to coworkers or superiors. We want to objectively explain how this isn't a problem. We don't want to have it be personalized or lay blame on other people. Again, downplaying the emotions of the situation. We then want to provide the details needed to understand the problem, any background information that's required to understand how this came to be, and then explain the solution right up front. You want to keep I or my out of that description of the solution. That can seem really egotistical to people sometimes. And so if you really want them to have buy-in or ownership over the solution, you have to present it in kind of an objective and not egotistical way so that they feel it's a choice that they're able to take ownership of as well. And then, of course, we're going to sandwich that negative in the middle and give it a positive emphasis and show how the advantages of the solution outweigh any negatives. And then reader benefit paragraph right before the end. When reader's attention is high, we're going to try to see the silver lining here and then request the action that you want. So what's the next step? Do you need approval? Do you need immediate follow-up on this? And so really being targeted in terms of what is the reader's next step. In a report, and if it's a persuasive report like a feasibility or justification report, you can use a directed subject line, which makes your position clear. So if you've been asked to write some kind of recommendation, you might just go ahead and title your report something like recommendation to purchase new sales office in Poughkeepsie. You can also potentially use a benefit subject line which sells your recommendation, like increased sales if we make this next office purchase, and then you'll follow up that recommendation with the details and explanation of your proposal in your report. In terms of overcoming objectives, you want to really be, or objections, excuse me, you want to really, again, keep the personal out of it. Don't be defensive. Lean in. This is very much like getting peer review, right? Ask questions which are indirect so as not to back people into making a stand. Kind of give them the opportunity to, explain their position and listen to that carefully. So that's kind of a fact-finding mission, actually, in a way. It allows you to find out what could be the key to getting that person to accept your solution. So again, indirect questions allow people to explain themselves. Lean into the criticisms. Don't be defensive, so that you're able to really discover what could motivate people to accept your request. Ask follow-up questions for the same reason. See if you can find out more about why they're making the decisions they are. You want to consider those who have a vested interest very carefully. I have a little picture of King of the Hill here. You want to analyze whether their objections are emotional or if they're a person who just benefits from the way things already are, and then these will be situations that you'll have to mediate. You might not be able to get those people completely on their side, on your side, without kind of extending some kind of benefit or assurance to them. That said, you don't want to single people out either. You don't want to lay blame on people or assign the problem to someone else's doorstep or, talk about solutions in any other way other than objectively and just, laying out the facts and information of the situation. Because we all know, I have a picture here of, this was when Obama and Romney were presidential candidates, and they're clearly pointing fingers at one another. We have a tendency to want to follow that kind of political theater in our own personal and business lives, and it's just really ineffective. We know how that makes us feel about the candidates when they begin the kind of blame game or personal attacks. And so that's similar in the workplace. If you begin to single people out as part of the problem, you're not going to get them to buy in or motivate them to accept your solution. You also want to build your credibility by being trustworthy. Be factual, specific, and reliable. Don't exaggerate, just give people the information they need in order to make a decision. And you want to consider your tone, timing, and appeals. And so, for instance, with those people with vested interests, you might think about that emotional appeal. Or if it's some kind of recommendation or shared problem, you might think about how to get everyone behind it as a team. Sometimes psychological descriptions can really help people to see themselves within the solution, and that can be a really effective reader benefit. Again, building towards team spirit with positive emphasis, looking for common ground. Where can people come to the middle and be able to compromise? And these kinds of emotional appeals, though, you want to be careful. They work best when people are already wanting to be persuaded. They want a solution to the problem. They're hungry for it. You're able to help them buy in by giving them those emotional tickets to ownership. Consider your audience. Are your orders appropriate? Are you writing to your boss? Are you writing to your coworkers? Think very carefully about your tone. You don't want to tell people what they should be doing, being preachy or parental and kind of, talking to them as though they're 5 years old and have made a mistake and got their hand caught in the cookie jar. Be professional, be formal if you have to, and be polite. And then think about time. How fast do you need actions to happen? It's really helpful often if people are given a specific limit in terms of when you need a decision to be made. The longer that they delay, the less likely action becomes. They'll sit on it for as long as they can if you don't give them a deadline. And you want to also convince them that that's in their best interest. Show the benefit of acting quickly, and if you have to, show them the cost of delaying action. Will the prices go up? Could we miss the opportunity? What needs to be done in order to get them, to motivate them to act decisively and within a reasonable time frame for your decision and for the solution to the problem to be effective and to work. All right, that gives you an idea of how to write persuasive messages. And again, this will be the kind of message that you'll be writing as a report form for assignment 4.